Meeting. I'm Eric Davis, Chair of the Board, and I call this meeting to order. Welcome all board members, advisors, staff, on-site visitors, online listeners, and Twitter followers, and remind all that you can follow our meeting on Twitter at EDStateBoard_NC. Remind the audience and those listening, this body meets monthly with its official meeting scheduled for the first Thursday of the month. And also a reminder that due to our planning and work session over the last 2 days, discussion of agenda items will occur today with voting on certain items later this month. I also remind on-site visitors and online listeners, you can follow our meeting online and see our materials by going to SBE meetings at www.ncpublicschools.org. We're delighted today to come to you from the Sandhills region, the home of the tremendous University of North Carolina at Pembroke and the College of Education here at Pembroke, as well as we're sitting in the home of Robinson County Schools, the public schools of Robinson County, one of our fine public school units. And we're delighted to visit those two partners, as well as meet in the Thomas Entrepreneurship Hub, part of the business school here at UNC Pembroke. So thank you so much to our host for having us. We've thoroughly enjoyed being in your community, learning from you and your educators, and building our partnership. In addition, this month we celebrate Veterans Day, a time when we pay tribute to the men and women who've sacrificed for our freedom. While we're most likely to remember veterans that we've known personally, this month is an opportunity and a chance to remember the history and sacrifice, contribution from veterans throughout our nation's story. Not only should we remember the sacrifice of these brave men and women, but also their contributions to society upon their return from active duty. From school teachers to business owners to public servants, they continue to serve and contribute around our state. In fact, we're forever indebted to these brave men and women for their courage and service to our country, and I encourage our teachers and school leaders to take time this month to collaborate with veterans and veteran service organizations and recognize the bravery and sacrifice of our veterans through activities, lesson plans, and special programs. This month, we're also celebrating International Education Week. The State Board holds as part of its vision that every public school student will be empowered to accept academic challenges, prepared to pursue their chosen path after graduating from high school, and encouraged to become lifelong learners with the capacity to engage in a globally competitive society. The 2022 International Education Week, which will be celebrated November 14th to 18th, is an opportunity for students and educators to celebrate the benefits of global education and exchange worldwide. This joint initiative of the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of State is part of the effort to promote programs and opportunities to prepare our students for a global environment. A variety of International Education Week activities are being planned by the Department of Public Instruction, including a day of celebration webinar and a student showcase. North Carolina's future depends more heavily now than ever before on our students graduating fully prepared for jobs in life in a globalized society. We're already inextricably linked to the rest of the world, and through our global relationships that will become deeper and more extensive over time. It's important that our students graduate from our public schools globally confident and ready to understand and act on issues of global significance. At this time, I'll turn to our superintendent for a special recognition.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chair Davis. I learned yesterday that North Carolina recently competed in the National FFA Convention and Expo. And I think sometimes we tend to forget that agriculture is still this state's largest and most productive industry. And I just couldn't let it go without being said that there are two groups from here in Lumberton who won national awards. One of them is they won the National Chapter Award for building communities. And the other group from Lumberton, they won an award for, let's see, I lost it. They got the first place in the National FFA Hall of States. There's a whole slate of winners from North Carolina. And for the first time since 1996, North Carolina has a national, has an officer at the national level. And so we will share all of these successes in greater detail in December, but just wanted to give a shout out to those two groups from right here in Lumberton.
Thanks so much, Superintendent. We look forward to recognizing the entire slate of awardees in December, as you mentioned. Thank you. Board members, you're reminded that it's our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this board. Does any member of the board know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. If during the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and voting on the matter. Also, remind us all to, when you're speaking, to sort of lean into the microphones we have in front of us to facilitate all in the room, as well as through the live streaming of hearing our comments. I now ask for a motion to approve the agenda for the November 3rd, 2022 State Board of Education agenda. So moved. Motion by Mr. Keenan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Oxendine. Dr. Petrie-Mark.
Dr. Oxendine.
Yes.
Mrs. Kammitz.
Yes.
Mr. Keenan.
Yes.
Mr. Hope.
Yes.
Dr. Tipton Rogers.
Yes.
Mrs. White.
Yes.
Mr. Blackburn.
Yes.
Mr. Ford. Treasurer Falwell. Lieutenant Governor Robinson. Vice Chair Duncan.
Yes.
And Chair Davis.
Yes. Thank you. The motion carries. We have an agenda. This time I call on Ms. Dwight to lead us in the pledge, and I'd ask us all to imagine at the podium the most beautiful flag you've ever seen. Ms. Dwight.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and its to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Thank you so much. We're going to jump right into our first committee meeting, and that is the Educator Standards and Practice Committee, chaired by my colleague, Dr. Olivia Oxendine. Dr. Oxendine.
Thank you, Chair Davis. I am Olivia Oxendine, and I chair the Educator Standards and Practice Committee. And joining me in that responsibility is Ms. Amy White. This month, we have one new business item, one action item, and two discussion items. We will get started with the new business item, and this is the presentation of the Teacher Working Conditions Survey report. And this is going to be presented by Mr. Alessandro Montaneri and Dr. Stephanie Benedict with Academic Development Institute. As we know, this is a permanent part of the North Carolina budget, and it dates back to 2006. It is a very, very important study that comes out every 2 years. Our school districts, our principals and others in our LEAs use and rely on this data to inform their school improvement planning. It's a report that I look forward to, and it's a report that we're very proud of as a State Board of Education. So I'll turn to Mr. Montanero to begin the report.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. Good morning, Chairman Davis, Vice Chairman Duncan, State Superintendent Truitt, board members and advisors. As Dr. Oxendine explained, our North Carolina Teacher Working Conditions Survey happens every 2 years. During that 2-year cycle, we present 3 times to the State Board. The first time is just an introduction of the survey rollout. Second time is just a quick view of the data that we've collected a month after the survey. And today is the deep dive. Today is when we go and show you a little bit more of the reports that superintendents and educators across the state have received. I'm very lucky today to have a project manager for Academic Development Institute, our vendor, here with us today. They've been extremely awesome to work with. This edition of the survey happened without any glitch whatsoever for all 125,000 educators across our state. So I'll give it to Stephanie Benedict, and then I'll follow.
Thank you all for having me. I'm going to just talk about the Teacher Working Conditions Survey a little bit. It began in 2002 in North Carolina, and it's conducted every 2 years. The survey is completed or open to all teachers, educators, administrators, and licensed school-based educators, full or part-time. It's funded by the state legislature here in North Carolina, and it's administered by DPI as well as a vendor, which currently is the Academic Development Institute out of Lincoln, Illinois. The North Carolina was the first state to administer a statewide teaching conditions survey. And it says 16, but I believe there's actually 18 states currently that do the survey. Some of the areas, oops, sorry. So the survey results, okay, go back. Okay. So some of the areas of teaching conditions that I wanted to focus on are teacher leadership, instructional practices, managing student conduct, professional development, and you can see the rest of them here, including equity and safety. So the survey results can be used in many states for school improvement planning. I'll talk a little bit later about how we've incorporated a crosswalk for the NC STAR platform that many schools use in North Carolina. It can be used for evaluations as well as state equity plans. And of course, compliance for SFT. So just a little bit about the rollout. For those of you who don't know or didn't remember, we actually met as an advisory committee starting in, I believe it was October of 21. We worked through the survey and rolled out the new survey website, which is nctwcs.org on January 5th. We also started a social media campaign that worked very well, I believe, this year. It was pretty exciting to work with the communications department on that rollout. We also had survey support open up early. I know in previous years it didn't open up until right before the survey started. We actually began January 5th with a toll-free number as well as email notifications so they could email us. The survey packets were mailed out to schools in mid-February with the client support line being open. A lot of folks could get those codes early and be ready and prepared. And the race was on starting March 1st. We had a lot of, when the survey opened, there was about a 5-minute downtime was the only glitch we had because within the first few minutes, there was about 10,000 people trying to get into the survey. So, and it ran through March 31st. We had 24/7 access to the survey so they could do it at their convenience. And we did have live results ready for districts so they could see their participation rate as their educators completed the survey. This year, we were happy to see there were 122,371 educators and administrators invited to participate in the survey. And we had a response rate of 91.96, which was a pretty good response rate. And you can see here, there's just respondents from the previous years. The 84 was the year of COVID, so that was a little bit low, but we're hoping in the future to keep that rate up above where it is. This is a breakdown of how many schools completed the survey. You can see there's 2,346 completed the survey. Charter schools 325 and non-traditional 19. So that's 2,690 schools completed the survey. And just break down the respondents by role. 87% of the people that filled out the survey were teachers, 9% other educators, license-based educators, 2% principals and assistant principals. The website is still open. It will remain open for folks to go in and they can get their live result or get their results. Whether it's at the district level, the school level, the state, as well as administrative results are all posted on the website. We took the results and put them on the website so that you can get, again, individual results by question, or you can get some results in summary at state, district, and school level. And then an agree analysis has been created as well for each state, district, and school. And there's a historical comparison to show the last 3 cycles of the survey there. The resources and tools we created because of the survey this year was a data protocol document that schools and districts can use to take a look at their data and know what to do with it. realistically in their buildings. We created an infographic so they can see the results of the survey, and then at the bottom, you can't quite see it. We did create an NC STAR crosswalk, so taking the data from their schools and districts and applying it to their improvement planning.
Thank you. So yeah, one of the big questions we've always received about the survey is always, okay, you have the survey, we have the data, now what? This was a big emphasis this year for our advisory council. So we worked on the data protocol, as Stephanie Benedict stated. We've also developed professional development on the protocol. That actually, the first presentation of that happened at the AIM conference. It was very well received. And we will continue to offer that as one of the many PDs that we offer at district and regional support. With the NC STAR tool, one of the benefits of having the vendor that helps us with NC STAR and helps us with the North Carolina Teacher Working Conditions Survey is that, as Stephanie pointed out, a crosswalk has been developed in the instrument so that when school improvement teams meet, they can filter the effective practices by the questions of the survey, and they can pick and choose what effective practices they want to work on in their plan according to the responses that they received, according to the data that they received. So this is a big plus this year, and we see schools and districts already benefiting from this. So all the reports, tons of data that's out there. In July, superintendents received the scatter plots. You're going to get a little sneak peek of what those look like now. And then on Tuesday of this past week, superintendents received all the beginning new teacher reports, the stayer, mover, leaver reports, the pandemic question reports, tons of different data files. And those were sent to superintendents by emails by our regional education facilitators. And then the other piece of data that we started in 2018 given out was the data tied to the Ingersoll research. Ingersoll did a study on these surveys across the country and found that there's 5 questions in particular that look at school improvement. So we gave them that data as well. You're going to see some samples of what those look like in the next few slides. So scatter plots, they received an overall look at their district. We have put acronyms here for the schools so that they're hopefully not recognizable. But this is a district in North Carolina, and a superintendent or a district leader could look at these scatter plots and try to figure out what conversations to have with which school leaders in which schools. So they have the overall for the entire survey, and then if we look at the next slide, you're fine. I think it went down 3 slides. They also received it for each construct. So for example, in this slide right here, they see that teacher leadership, we have a school FE, that's definitely a question I got to have with that building, what's going on there, how can we help, how can we provide resources to help improve teacher leadership in that school. Same thing happens in the opposite spectrum. If I have schools, like in this case, HCCC, which scored really high on school leadership, what can we learn from HCCC so that the other schools can improve as well? When you're looking at the scatter plot, top right quadrant means positive change, positive agreement. Bottom left quadrant means the survey results went down, right? Negative agreement. Keep going. And they have them for every construct, so they can look at retention, they can look at safety, they can look at equity, they can look at every single section of the survey this way. And all of this, as Stephanie explained earlier, is to guide them on the school improvement process or district improvement process, right? We have a lot of districts currently right now working on their district strategic plans. Ingersoll Research heat maps that they received, just take those 5 questions and analyze the responses under those 5 questions for each of their schools. It also gives each superintendent the district average and compared to the state average and compared to the regional average, so you can see how their district is doing compared to others in that region. Big emphasis on the Ingersoll research is teacher voice, right? Teacher voice matters. Are we listening to our teachers? Do our teachers feel that they have a voice in improvement decisions in the school? And at the same time, do we have accountability set up, and do we have good mission and vision happening? Does everyone understand what our work is in this building? And obviously they can use the heat maps, pinpoint any data that sticks out. If they see anything red, that's definitely something they want to look at and try to have conversations with that building. Just as we've done in past surveys, this is just a chart that we create for the state board presentation. It's a comparison of every construct in the survey. In this case, it's between our schools designated as low performing across our state of North Carolina, with the list that just came out in September, and our schools that are not on that list. We can see the differences in how the questions are responded. That's 2,700 schools, both non and on the list, are always talking about the need for professional development. And we see that in schools across the state, no matter the designation. But then we do see differences in how they respond to time, how they respond to community and support and involvement. And then the retention, always, you'll notice some differences in these slides. Next slide as well. This is comparison between schools that are recurring low performing. That's 2 out of the past 3 lists that have come out, and those that are non. And you'll notice the same differences in the constructs that I pointed out. And then in 2020, for the first time, we did this chart at a request from the state board. It's just a comparison of traditional and charters with a view of all the constructs. And you do notice, whether you're traditional or charter, the ask for more professional development. Tons of reports are done by ADI to guide Prince superintendents with regards to beginning teachers, stayer mover leaders. Definitely glad they will talk a little bit about these.
Okay, so I'm going to stand in the middle this time. So for stayers, movers, and leavers, this is where we want to figure out why teachers are staying, why are they leaving, why are they moving to different positions. So here it looks like there's a lot of data. Each district received this report for every single construct. You're just seeing a couple of them there. So it informs areas of concern that need to be addressed. They can figure out how to build and establish shared leadership between the classroom and the building level. We'll go to the next. So here we're looking at beginning teacher supports across each region. And it's pretty even across all of the regions, the supports that schools and principals received. The reduced workload was a little bit of a low number here. You can see across the board. So beginning teachers did not feel like they had a reduced workload across the state. This is the beginning teacher agree analysis. Again, they received this for every single or every construct that had an agree or disagree in it. So here, 95%, if you go up a little bit farther, or to the beginning teacher agree analysis. The other way. Okay, so you can see here, there was about 95% of beginning teachers said that they did receive a mentor, which is really great. 80% of them received orientation. 80% though also said that they did not have the ability to observe their mentor, and their mentor was not observing them. So that's, it's great that everybody received it. And the next one. So here there were really good scores across the board, which means that the supports that the beginning teachers did receive, they were a good impact on their teaching and leading. Next one. And this is beginning teacher versus veteran teacher. Again, the district, the regions, as well as the state received this report. They got this for every single construct, so there's a lot of data showing. But we want to look at what are beginning teachers telling us, what are veteran teachers telling us, who's leaving, who's staying. So that's what all of these reports will help schools and districts really think about.
So to wrap up the presentation, one of the requests that was made for the first time by the board was there are some questions that administrators answer, and there are some questions that teachers answer that are very similar. So you all wanted to see a comparison of how administrators responded and how educators, teachers responded to these questions. So we created some slides showing you those comparisons of those questions for each of the constructs. So community support and involvement, you'll notice that principals and educators in the building pretty much responded the same way when it comes to community support and involvement. Managing student conduct, almost the same. Safe environment was pretty much identical. But then when it comes to the question about maintaining discipline in the building, teachers responded a little differently than principals on that one. Decision-making, both pretty much evenly. School administrators and teachers, pretty even there. Leadership, same thing. Professional development, they're both on the same page, except that you notice a little higher agreement there on the teacher side, responding to that. Principals a little lower, and that actually matches national information that we get. We understand that when we talk about professional development funds, 91% of those funds are typically used on teacher and improving classroom instruction. Very little is used at the principal level, which is going to tie really, really well to another presentation you'll hear this afternoon, which talks about things that we are doing at the department to help improve instructional capacity across our state. And then when it comes, you can go to the next slide. There's a double slide here. When it comes to the safety construct, here we do notice gaps here, but this is sort of expected, I think, as well. You do notice that the principal sees that certain conflicts or vandalism or weapons or bullying or things like that are happening more frequently than teachers do. And that's because principals tend to know more what's going on around the entire building, and teachers are more focused on their 110, 140 students. I think even though you see the gaps here and how they responded, I think this is expected from a principal perspective. And last slide, great news is that teachers and principals across the state, when it comes to safety and security measures, whether it be active shooter, natural disaster drills, just being prepared and ready for anything, everyone responded, over 95% agreement that we are ready and good to go with all this. And this wraps up our presentation. Please let us know if you have any questions.
Absolutely. Excellent information. From my colleagues, advisors, do you have any questions or comments? Superintendent Truitt.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the great presentation. I really appreciate you taking the board's feedback to heart. Those last comparison questions that you showed, that's statewide, is that right?
That's correct.
Did individual schools receive that data?
No, we did not send the comparison data out. That was just for the state board.
Can we get it at the school level?
Yes.
Okay. It's helpful, I guess, to see it statewide, but it would be more helpful to see it at the building level.
Yeah, we can definitely work on creating those and sending those out. Yes.
That would be amazing. And then my second question, if I may, is, Alessandro, to your knowledge, is anyone at DPI using this data?
I am sure all directors in the building are using this data. That would be my hope. I know we do at district and regional support. Like I said, we've created professional development around it, and our coaches in the field are working with it. But
I would love for you all to work with the Office of Learning Recovery and the school performance grade redesign work to kind of see where the similarities are between these survey results and the survey that we partnered with EdNC that we sent out, to see where that overlap is.
Sounds good.
Especially around issues of safety.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Very good. So we're getting a lot of work done here in this presentation. Any other comments or questions? I have a quick question about the Ingersoll fund. I think you said 5 additional questions. How is that? Is there a purpose? Are we going to use that in North Carolina, or is that for some broader national study?
No, so since 2018, that was added by the previous vendor to the survey. The questions were always there, but Dr. Ingersoll did a study of the survey in the 18 states that are using it. And he found that these 5 questions definitely were telling of what was happening in the schools. So since 2018, we've been distributing out to superintendents that heat map so that they can also see the results of those 5 questions and see how they can support their schools.
Very good. And this really ties in, board members and advisors, this ties in so nicely to our discussion yesterday morning on the use of dashboards, because we kind of brainstormed, first of all, the value of dashboards. And my question had to do with, can dashboards talk to each other? And I don't know whether there's an answer to that. But I'm just thinking about how your presentation echoes what we began talking about yesterday morning. I'm just always fascinated at the work that comes out of this initiative.
Thank you.
Thank you again. We look forward to future, someone is tapping me on the arm, a question.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. The question concerning the PD from our challenging schools and none. I thought it was interesting that PD wasn't, am I correct in using the word concern or need for, more of?
Yeah, I think need for is a request from the 120,000 people that took the survey because we see that percentage in all schools.
I thought that was interesting. PD was an issue with them. Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to make a comment because the PD resonated with me as well. And I think if I'm looking at this correctly, it looks like the lowest ranking question was around the differentiated PD. And I think that's a really big understanding of whether or not the PD is coming, but it doesn't necessarily fit 4th grade English language arts. It could just be general for everyone. And I think that that is a question that kind of ranked the lowest in the survey around professional development and how can we enhance that?
Yep.
That's very telling.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. The question that has to do with choice is always a huge one for us. Yeah.
And availability of that choice.
Any other questions or comments? If not, this is an item that doesn't require any action of the board. It's a new business item. So thank you again for all the hard work that you've devoted into the study report. We'll move right along to the next item. This is on action item ES&P 1, and this is going to be a very quick kind of thumbnail of an item that was brought forward last month, and Dr. Kim Evans is coming forward. This is the annual report of the Professional Educator Preparation and Standards Commission. We know it as PEPS. So, Dr. Evans, you have the mic.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to give a brief overview since I presented this last month. And just a reminder that the report term is September 1st, 2021 to August 31st, 2022. And the due date for this report is December 1st, 2022. So we are right on track for that. I just want to highlight that there was a change in membership, as I talked about last month. Dr. Patrick Miller retired from Greene County Schools, and so he has also retired from PEPS, and Dr. Van Dempsey, the dean at the Watson College of Education for UNC Wilmington, has taken his place. And you have all heard from him yesterday for several hours. So you've already had the privilege of being able to start working with him. And then there was a snapshot of what the current PEPS membership will be for this coming year. And I really just want to highlight the work that PEPS has done this past year. They have had 57 meetings scheduled for this past year, and 47 of those meetings were subcommittee meetings, especially working on and really diving into the work with the pathways model. And so they've really taken their time and concerted effort to really focus on that work. And as you know, this is a volunteer commission. And so they really take that very seriously. So I want to commend all of the members on PEPS for that hard work. And then lastly, you'll see the responsibilities and priorities for all of the subcommittees. And you can review that at your leisure. And if you have any questions, you can let us know. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And are there questions or comments from my colleagues around the table? I do want to underscore the fact that that report is really a strong, thorough report. Links to the meetings, even down to the subcommittee meetings of PEPS. So I plan to spend additional time over the next few days combing through that report myself, because it's just chock full of good information. Any questions that you have about the work of the subcommittees that have been working on the pathways, or any questions about the work of PEPS in general, you have the link to them and read it on your own. So thank you, Dr. Evans, for all the hard work that you put into this.
Thank you, Dr.
This is coming later for our vote. Okay, so we're going to move right along to the next item is another discussion item, ES&P2. This is going to be presented by Mr. Carl Logan, and he's the section chief for driver education, and just some not major revisions to the policy amendment to driver education 004. Nothing major, but some minor things in terms of formatting, and nothing substantial, but some needs to come to our attention. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Logan.
Thank you, Chair Davis, Vice Chair Duncan, Superintendent Truitt, Committee Chair Dr. Oxendine, Ms. White, board members, good morning. Pursuant to 115C-215, the state superintendent shall organize and administer a standardized driver education program in accordance with the criteria and standards approved by the State Board of Education. The recommendations today are actually very brief, although you may have seen a tremendous number of notations on the policy draft. The recommendations also are supported by the Driver Education Strategic Plan and the Novice Teen Driver Education Training Administrative Standards, or what we refer to as the national standards, where 4 of our team members actually have served on work groups with the national standards to update these. Today, we are only recommending one substantive change to the policy. And as we move forward, we are strongly encouraging teachers to use as many modalities as possible to promote learning of our many different demographics, cultures, learning styles, as well as providing easily accessible opportunities for all of our 134,000 students, eligible students, and regardless of where they're enrolled in school at nearly 1,500 locations throughout our state. Our substantive recommendation is in subsection number 2, number 7, where we have added language to expand the delivery methods of the classroom phase. And I'll highlight blended delivery is strongly encouraged to support student growth and best practices. In the definitions, which are also being recommended, are blended and best practices as 2 or more learning modalities. We've done this because there are 2 distinct driver education programs in our state. In the DMV program, it specifically states that students have to learn in a brick and mortar or in-person environment. That is not true with the public school program. These definitions also are are actually putting in policy frequently used terms that are used in state and national traffic safety education standards. So moving forward, such terms will provide guidance, standardization, and an aid in rulemaking as recommended by our General Counsel. The addition of these recommendations assist in providing solutions to administrative challenges such as student scheduling also. So this change request was strongly supported by our district leaders at our recent back to school regional meetings in August. And a special thanks to Superintendent Truitt for her welcome video that was well received and provided a perfect segue into our meeting's purposes. And number 8, this policy change adds to policy a guidance statement that we had been using for students with disabilities. So a special thanks to Carol Ann Hudgens of Exceptional Children for providing this appropriate language. And then number 9, districts should consider the total length of a student's instructional day when scheduling them. And with that, that concludes my recommendations. And I'll entertain questions.
Any questions? Tell you what I really like about your item this month. Within the policy change, this is the change that you're bringing forward, in terms of the blended model.
Yes.
You have all of those modes of teaching clearly defined. So I think that would be good, not just for driver education, but probably for any teacher or any model.
Well, thank you. I'd like to take credit for that, but it's actually General Counsel that helped for that, but thanks.
Okay, thank you. Whoever, thanks. Very good information. So this is, any questions or comments from my colleagues, advisors? And this will return next month for action by the board. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next item is also a discussion item, ES&P 3. This is the North Carolina Pathways to Excellence and for teaching professionals. And we have Cumming returning. He was here yesterday and spent a couple of hours with the board walking us through a synthesis of the work of PEPS and specifically the subcommittees, all the work that has been done heretofore on the Pathways to Excellence. And it was a very, very good session because for the very first time, it gave the board members a chance to break up in small groups, talk about the pathways, ask questions, ask more questions, identify what we like, things that need to be considered for revising. So it was a very, very good session. And we are going to have part 2 to the presentation, and we welcome you back today.
Thank you. Good. Thank you, Dr. Eckstein. Good morning to everybody. Today will be brief, certainly relative to the time and energy and work we did yesterday. And I want to thank everybody for the discussions and the insights and the perspectives that you were able to help create yesterday afternoon after I completed the presentation. Today, what I want to do is share from a timeline perspective just what's coming in the next steps with PEPS. As you all know, we have the working document that is before PEPS that we looked at in the subcommittees in its discrete parts, and they were brought together into the comprehensive document that PEPS now it has as a working document. We reviewed that document in September and October. That will be on the agenda for next week for us to continue to look at the revised version of that document based on the feedback from the last meeting and from those discussions. So we will see that document again on November the 10th. We are also going into that meeting prepared for action on recommendations that would be made to the state board based on the work that's been done by subcommittees and then PEPS. So we will continue the work on the 10th. We will look at action that we will consider relative to what that work has been and what those recommendations will be to the state board. And then assuming that there is an affirmative decision in PEPS, that would then be forwarded to the state board, and PEPS would begin its work with the state board relative to subsection 3 of the statute that we looked at yesterday. So that's where we are now. That's what I anticipate will happen on November 10th. We have not finalized that agenda. We will do that. You'll see documents posted and information that will be available early next week.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments? Very good.
Thank you.
And we will move on to the last portion of ES&P agenda for November. And this is ES&P 4, and these are 2 consent items. GS 115C 12-2022, the report to the North Carolina General Assembly, and this is the 21-22 report of the state of the teaching profession in North Carolina. I am asking that the board accept this as a consent item. There will be a follow-up at some time in the very near future. We'll have an in-depth presentation of that report to include specific data that is very pertinent to this report. The second consent item that I would like for you to consider is pertaining to Session Law 2017-189, Senate Bill 599. And this is a report that goes to the JLEOC annually. This is the monitoring of our EPP performance and recommendations. Again, this report will be presented to the board in more detail at a later time with full data. So if you have no other questions or concerns, that concludes ES&P for November. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. We'll now move to the Student Learning and Achievement Committee, chaired by Ms. Jill Kamnitz. Ms. Kamnitz.
Thank you, Chair Davis. I share the responsibility for the work of this committee with my Vice Chair, Dr. Oxendine. We have several items of new business today. Most of them are fairly brief, but we'll start off with our regular monthly update on science and healthful living standards work. And Dr. Marr is going to do this.
Good morning. Before I begin, I'd like to take just a moment to recognize a member of the standards team who passed away just over a week ago. Teresa Parker worked directly with the ELA team, but she supported individuals and teams throughout the Office of Academic Standards in our division. Teresa was a beloved member of the team who was lovingly referred to as Mother Teresa by many who knew her. We held a gathering this week where we had the privilege of hearing the stories of Teresa's compassion, her support of team members, and the love she had for her husband and son. Teresa served NCDPI and the state for more than 30 years, and she'll be sorely missed. Thank you. So today I bring you the regular monthly update for Office of Academic Standards for both science and healthful living. Just a quick reminder, this is State Board Policy SCOS 012. And so we review these standards every 5 to 7 years, and we are using a uniform and formalized system to do that. For your reference, the process is in the Interim Procedures Manual, pages 15 to 22. For science updates, and so this is, I want to recognize the work of Dr. Charles Aiken and his team. They have now moved from the Data Review Committee. That report is in its draft form and has been shared with the standards writing team. That team held an orientation work session in mid-October, and we are working our way through compiling that, and then we'll bring the first draft of from the standards writing team to the board soon. So we are within probably less than a month now. So we'll release the draft of revisions. They will come here. They will also go out publicly for review. We will get feedback from both the public and public schools. And then that data will move once again to the Office of Learning, Recovery, and Acceleration, where they will do the data analysis, bring it back, and get ready for the second revision. On the healthful living side, I want to thank Dr. Essick and her team for the work they've done, and I want to thank the board for giving us the grace of extending the timeline for the healthful living standards. Just so you're aware, I think when I came to you and asked for that extension, we were at about 30% participation. We almost reached the 80% that we were pushing for. I think we ended up with somewhere around 77 or 78% participation. So it was very helpful for us to be able to extend that timeline, get broad participation across the state to ensure we had good stakeholder feedback. We have since closed the stakeholder survey and the PSU survey, as well as the applications for the Data Review Committee and the Standard Writing Team. That data has since been sent to the Office of Learning and Recovery. They are working on the analysis now, both the qualitative and quantitative analysis. We will then finalize the Data Review Committee's work, send that report to the Standards Writing Team, and then move forward with the first draft, which we will bring to you again as it becomes available. So we are getting ourselves back on track. We expect that the science will be ready on time in the spring, and then healthful living shortly thereafter. Any questions?
Questions for Dr. Marlowe?
Okay, thank you.
Another report that we've heard in the last few months is the latest white paper series on additional support mitigated learning loss among economically disadvantaged students.
I'm just going to come up quickly and invite Kaylin Clifton to come up and give a quick overview on the white paper series on behalf of the Office of Learning Recovery.
Good morning, everyone. Ben Clifton, Research Analyst, Office of Learning, Recovery, and Acceleration. Good to be here in sunny Pembroke, North Carolina, seat of the storied Lumbee people. Today we will discuss OLR's newest blog post, which focuses specifically on academic progress among economically disadvantaged students during the 2020-2021 school year. This work was done in partnership with colleagues in federal programs, namely Tunisia Madry and James Pop. Given our topic, I should first mention my experience teaching at a Title I school. Between 2021 and 2018, I proudly taught at Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School, which is tucked into the Hidden Valley community of Northside Charlotte. There at MLK, we believed in our work, and most importantly, we believed in our students. Here are this month's summary results. Overall, many students exceeded academic expectations during 2020-2021, including many economically disadvantaged students. On average, schools with greater academic progress in 2018 also had greater academic progress in 2021. And as we'll see near the end, on average, economically disadvantaged students in CSI and TSI schools experienced less learning loss than economically disadvantaged students in other schools. The first two graphs that we'll briefly look at will help us understand that first and second point, that many students, including economically disadvantaged students, exceeded academic expectations during the height of the pandemic. Here we see 2 years, 2018 and 2021, with results representing the test scores of all tested students. For now, let's focus our attention on the right-hand side of each graph, blue bars, which are 3 separate bars attached end to end on the right side of 0. These blue bars are color-coded according to the percent of students who achieved either small, moderate, or large gains, as you can see at the bottom, where darker shades indicate larger gains. The total length of these blue bars gives the percent of students who exceeded academic expectations in that year for that subject. The vertical dashed lines, you can see 2 on the right and the left, allow us to quickly determine whether at least 50% of students exceeded expectations. For example, in math grade 5 in 2021, the blue bar falls short of the vertical dashed line, telling us that about 30% of students exceeded expectations. Looking at each shade of blue individually, about 2% by a small amount, about 6% by a moderate amount, and about 23% by a large amount. If you were to compare side to side, you would notice that 2021's blue bars do not go as far to the right as those of 2018, telling us that a lower percentage of students exceeded expectations in 2021 for every subject except for English 2. However, it is still yet true that in every subject, many students exceeded expectations and did exceptionally well. The next graph will give us the same exact thing except for economically disadvantaged students only. If you were to flip back and forth rather quickly, you would see that in both years here, the blue bars do not extend as far to the right as those in the previous graph, which tells us that across subjects, economically disadvantaged students were less likely to exceed expectations than their non-economically disadvantaged peers. And an important point to make here is that, in fact, this difference grows between 2018 and 2021. For example, 53% of economically disadvantaged test takers exceeded academic expectations in math grade 5 during 2018, as compared to 60% of other students, a difference of 7 percentage points. In 2021, for the same subject, 24% of economically disadvantaged students exceeded expectations, as compared to 36% of other students, a difference of 12 percentage points. Between years, in other words, this difference grew from 7 to 12 percentage points. This tells us that at least in that one subject, and it's true overall, that economically disadvantaged students who already experienced greater challenges were disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. However, again, it is still true, as you can see, that many economically disadvantaged students exceeded expectations and did exceptionally well. Next slide, please. So where were these bright spots? Well, on average, they were in the same places as they were pre-pandemic. Here, these upward sloping lines tell us that schools with greater academic progress in 2018 also had greater academic progress in 2021. However, the purple line is lower than the blue line, as it reiterates the fact that economically disadvantaged students experience greater loss. And here, even among those who attended schools with similar pre-pandemic academic quality. But again, both lines slope upwards. From my perspective, this suggests that when large negative shocks like the pandemic occur, we should be most concerned about schools and students that were already challenged, and we will continue to explore this idea in the future. Well, what else can we learn about where and how things work for economically disadvantaged students during the pandemic? Perhaps pre-existing additional support may have mitigated learning loss. Next slide, please. To explore this idea, we analyzed outcomes among 4 federally designated groups of schools with additional support in place before and throughout during the pandemic. Here on this slide, you can see our 4 groups. These are comprehensive support and improvement, low performing, comprehensive support and improvement, low graduation rate, targeted support and improvement, continually underperforming among economically disadvantaged students, and last but not least, targeted support and improvement, additional targeted support for economically disadvantaged students. And then finally, we include other schools as a comparison group. That's just any school that does not carry a CSI or a TSI designation. Next slide, please. Thank you. Here, let's focus specifically for now on the upper left corner, which displays average learning loss across all subjects. Our 4 federal designations are along the bottom, as well as other schools, which are, again, just any school that doesn't carry a CSI, TSI designation. In short, the farther downward the line extends, the greater the learning loss within that specific subgroup of schools. The upper left panel, to summarize, shows us that economically disadvantaged students within CSI and TSI schools experience 43% less learning loss across all subjects than economically disadvantaged schools who attended schools not receiving CSI, TSI support. This suggests that supports can be effective when used proactively. CSI, TSI was not intended to be pandemic relief as it was in place before the pandemic, but appears to have acted as such. We'll also continue to explore that idea. Next slide, please. In conclusion, students and student outcomes vary. Understanding such variation can help us better target resources to those with disproportionate need. We can link this variation to different experiences to help us better evaluate our work and therefore improve the future. The final 2 bullets provide an idea of possible future analyses that we will continue to work on in conjunction with federal programs. I myself am particularly excited about ongoing work around school performance designations. At this point, we'll open it up for Q&A. Thank you.
Any questions on this report? I have a quick question, Ms. Kim. This is the whole area of the research around learning loss is just intriguing. My question is this: the methodology that you're using, the way you're making some determination about loss, could that same approach be applied to loss of learning during summer vacations?
With the right data, we could look at that. We already collect, at least in a few grades that I'm aware of, end of year data as well as beginning of year data. Anything that we consider to be an outcome or can be studied as an outcome, if we have data on it, it's simply a matter of switching that data point out for what we want to study.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Clements. I would love to know more about what federal programs did, about what that CSI and TSI support looked like that clearly made a difference.
Sure, I can speak just briefly to that. We linked to several documents in the blog post, which is currently live on the OLR website. These supports can include anything ranging from targeted professional development, additional support in the planning process, feedback on plans that they already have, additional funding from things like Title I. They have a quite robust list of supports that either some schools within CSI, TSI get, or they are kind of universal across that group. They have a very rich list.
Thank you.
Do we know the total number of schools, of support schools that we're talking about here?
We do. I can't list it off the top of my head. However, it is in the blog. It is a quite large number of schools, yes. I believe in the blog, greater than half of tested students attend a CSI, TSS.
Mr. Hall.
Just quickly, sir. Where can you find this information? Did you say it's posted?
Yes, absolutely. If you were to Google, if you were to Google, this is the easiest way to find it. Oh, it is probably linked there as well. But yeah, if you were just to Google research and recovery roundup, it's the first result on Google.
It's revealing, it's good information. If we put it in the right hands for them to use it. If I got to Google it, might not get there. So if we could, Madam Superintendent.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. If you could just get it,
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Google.
Okay. Dr. Mark, could you go back to the first slide, the summary results? My question is, what's the definition of expectations in this slide?
That's an excellent question. So the data that I work with to produce these reports that I bring to you, the expectation of academic performance is part of the educator effectiveness system we work in conjunction with EVOS. And essentially, to kind of summarize what they do is they project a student's score for the test that they expect that student to take based on their previous testing history.
Yeah, we're familiar with the concept of growth. That's what you're referring to.
It is one and the same.
So what this slide means is that students who received the CSI and TSI support, group economically disadvantaged students that received the CSI and TSI support grew more than economically disadvantaged students who did not receive CSI and TSI support. Is that a correct interpretation?
That's a very close. If we could go back to the slide, the downward extending lines.
Yeah.
The definition that, not necessarily a definition, but the approach that I take in, keep going, please. The one kind of the lines with the mark from the end. The next slide, yes. So here, it's not, it is true that they were more likely to meet growth, but specifically what we show is that the loss was not as severe, which is almost one and the same, but just
Different side of the coin.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So then that makes me think that this should inform our district and school transformation work. We should expand whatever those techniques are, which you mentioned, which sounds like a lot of individual connection to students.
Yep.
Beyond what the federal government requires us to do. I think that's the punchline in your report, if I'm interpreting correct.
Yes, I will say as an analyst, I don't really know everything that goes on in the field. I rely on information that comes to me, but I would think that the people in federal programs and others that are within these schools would attest to the fact that, you know, they think those are the things that are helping them, at least some of the things that are helping them to.
Yeah, some, but not necessarily all.
Sure.
Thank you.
In reference to the proactive versus reactive approach and the impact on students that already had supports in place, because the committee work that we do with Restart, I would be very curious to isolate the Restart schools to see if the data, because we have schools that have had a 4-year pattern of infrastructure in place and flexibilities in place. I would be interested to see the comparison with the proactive Restart infrastructure that we had in place to see if it mirrors this data or whether they're outliers and maybe some stories for success there. Did we do that in working with Dr. Martin Speed?
I would like to think that yes, we can. Actually, the framework that is presented here, I mean, the key to this is I have a list of these schools, and I can directly identify students that attend those schools. So if there are other school lists that are out there, different programs, different designations, it's simply a matter of merging it into the data that I've been working with and know very well. In fact, this month, in the month of November, we're going to be looking at Purple Star schools in a very similar way.
You can do this for any defined group of school.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
That'd be great for me. Yes.
And to piggyback on what you're suggesting, we need a crosswalk that shows schools that are receiving TSI and CSI support and are state designated low performing schools and Restart schools so that we can see who is being served and who isn't being served. that would be a great project for your team, Jenny.
Any further questions about this very revealing?
But I hope that if we do that, Madam Superintendent, in a timely fashion, I know it won't happen overnight, but to get it out in a timely way so we'll be able to see it and deal with it now, so these children would have a better chance.
We will
You
have,
understand what I'm saying?
yeah, we'll have it to you within the next 2 weeks.
Well, that's a timely matter. I won't give you a month or two, but I'll take 2 weeks.
And I did just want to note, we are continuing that partnership through, with the EBOS team at SAS. So specific to this recovery data, thinking about predicted versus actual scores, not just for 2021, but for 21-22, in partnership with the board. So that'll be data that we'll be able to update, and something that I think as a state we are certainly in conversations about how we might use these predicted versus actual scores beyond the pandemic. I mean, this is something that we could think about. So really fortunate to have quantitative analysts inside the agency that allows us to look at the things we're doing across the state in very kind of rigid and robust ways.
And if I could just make one more comment, Mrs. Cameron. Let's not forget that as our data continues to trend as it has, and students begin reading proficiently, more and more schools will come off of a low performing list because they're on that list based, not the TSI and the CSI, but state designation. They're on that list largely because they cannot read proficiently. And so the theory of change is that when they are reading proficiently, other scores, not just ELA, will come up, and the math will see a bump. They just might not be proficient. That's a separate beast to tackle. But part of the reason math scores are as low as they are is it also has to do with lack of reading proficiency.
That's all right.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon. Yes, thank you. Our next item, which is going to be very quick,
Is this the qualitative?
Yes, qualitative research.
Great. Yes. So we have the good fortune to be able to hire Kaylin, very quantitative focus. And now Dr. Erin Manuel is going to be coming up. She's a qualitative researcher. And I don't know, about a year ago, the state board approved use of ESSER2 funds to fund 4 qualitative research studies. And so Dr. Manuel is going to come up and give you guys an update on where we are with those projects.
Thank you, Dr. Foreign. Good morning, Superintendent Truitt, Chairman Davis, Vice Chair Duncan, and State Board members. My name is Dr. Erin Manuel, Research Analyst with the Office of Learning, Recovery, and Acceleration. This morning, I will be presenting a high-level overview of the qualitative research studies that our UNC Chapel Hill partnerships have been engaged in the last 8 months. State Board members have also been provided a copy of a one-pager, which gives more detail about the research team's progress. We are fortunate to have most of our research principal investigators and co-PIs here today to take any additional questions if needed. Overall, I am honored to be a part of this work, and I'm excited to share with the State Board and the broader community the unique perspective and evaluative impact that qualitative research has within the context of summer learning programs in elevating promising practices. Next slide, please. The purpose of these qualitative research partnerships is to explore the meaning, experiences, and perspectives of the Summer Bridge and Career Accelerator programs. It is important to add that this context allows us to understand how to target, design, and support student re-engagement, academic recovery, and acceleration. So with that in the end, we can leverage these promising practices across North Carolina. Next slide. The focus of these studies are centered on the implementation, impact, improvement, perspectives, and experiences on the learning recovery programs, which are the Summer Bridge, School Extension, and/or the Career Accelerator. In order to enact this vision, ESSER2 funding was identified to support the overall evaluation of these types of summer learning opportunities utilizing a qualitative research approach, in this case, predominantly case studies or mixed methods. Next slide. This is just a review of the timeline. Teams began in February, March 2022, and the site recruitment occurred April through June of 2022. Thank you. All teams have finalized their data and are wrapping up their last phase of data collection, which is early November, and the final report will be disseminated February 2023 and presented to you all March 2023. Next slide. Our first research team is North Carolina State University Friday Institute and Duke University Social Science Research Institute. And our principal investigator, Dr. Sean Kellogg, is here with us today. And our co-PI is our Jessica Spearling, Alicia Fisher, Dr. Kevin Wynn, and Dr. Adrian Brown. The title of the research is When Summer Learning Succeeds, Content, Conditions, and Strategies that Maximize Impact. Next slide, please. The purpose of the qualitative study is examining the implementation of elementary summer school programs targeting at-risk students following the 2021-22 academic school years. They are conducting the research in regions 3 and 4, and with a focus on the summer bridge programming, which is PRC 176. Their research will compare program implementation of both high and low performing PSUs with the goal of identifying effective program components and the conditions necessary for their success. Some of the research questions include what strategies, instructional approaches, and conditions are critical to the feasible and successful implementation of elementary summer learning programs, and overall impact. How do elementary programs impact non-academic outcomes for students, teachers, and families? Some of their primary forms of data collection included student assessments, ELA and math, administrator, teachers, staff interviews, district-level interviews, and site-level program visits. Some of their preliminary findings show that regarding implementation of academic success factors, that prepared, well-structured curricula that requires minimal teaching planning, teacher flexibility to adapt curriculum to individual student class needs, wraparound services support for social skills and emotional well-being, and small student to teacher class ratio. The non-academic impacts in terms of their preliminary findings show that of these summer learning programs, that reacclimating to the physical school environment, learning how to be a student, establishing relationships with students prior to the school year, building parent-teacher relationships during the summer, and extended summer childcare for parents. Next slide. Our next research team is EPIC, which is the Education Policy Initiative at Carolina. This team is led by Dr. Julie Marks. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to be here on site, but she is joining virtually by WebEx, and she will take questions as needed. Her co-PI is Dr. Sarah Fuller, and the title of the research is an active implementation evaluation of school extension programs in Western North Carolina. Their qualitative study will examine the what, how, and why of school extension impacts behind the mandated outcomes of competency-based assessment, grade promotion, retention, and credit recovery for high school students. They are using a framework called the National Implementation Research Framework, which is built around 3 components and addresses 3 aims. The first aim is the effective practices, which is the what. The second aim is the effective implementation, the how. And the third aim is enabling context, the why. EPIC has been very fortunate to leverage the existing research partnerships with a charitable organization known as Dogwood Trust, which is headquartered in Asheville, North Carolina, and they're conducting the research again in the western part of the state, regions 7 and 8, with the Summer Bridge program and the Summer Career Accelerator program. Their main research questions are, how are summer learning programs being implemented in high schools within the western part of the state, and to what extent do educators perceive the summer learning programs are achieving their desired outcomes? Lastly, what are the enabling and inhibiting conditions for the successful implementation and participation in school extension activities? Some of their primary forms of data collection include interviews with superintendents, district staff, and school principals within the 7 districts in North Carolina. And in this current phase, they're working on student and teacher focus groups, site visits, and follow-up surveys with summer 2022, and some students and administrators that did or did not participate in that particular program. Initial reflections on the preliminary findings show that the impacts of the summer learning program include credit recovery, closing skill gaps, more motivation to complete coursework upon the return to school, and development of relationships between students and staff. Some of the challenges of the program include competition with summer jobs, especially for high school students,
teacher burnout. There's little break between the summer learning programs and school year, and student transportation. Next slide, please. Our third research team is East Carolina University, which is the Rural Education Institute. We have here today with us Dr. Kristen Cuthrell, who's representing East Carolina University REI, and she's the PI. And her co-PIs are Doctors Reardon, Blanchard, Alstetter, Swain, Crum, Quinn, McKissick. The title of the research is Elevating Rural Voices. Next slide. The purpose of the qualitative study is to identify the impact, if any, of summer learning programs on members, teachers, schools, parents, students, and community perceptions, engagement, and lived experiences. They are conducting the research in regions 1 and 2 with a focus on Summer Bridge PRC 176. The team recruited districts from districts 1 and 2 as outlined in their proposal, and they intentionally identified 2 to 3 North Carolina rural school districts that represent rural fringe, rural distant, and rural remote locales. They aim to partner with rural school districts in high poverty counties to assess and discern how to provide equitable educational services to students, families, and school personnel in these historically underserved rural areas. They are also utilizing a research practitioner framework or partnership, which is holistic in its model and inclusive and participatory. Their main research question focuses on to what extent does school extension programming in a rural context impact student learning and school engagement from several perspectives: students, families, educators, and administrators. Their primary forms of data collection included semi-structured interviews, focus groups, demographic surveys, and photo elicitation. And photo voice or photo elicitation is a visual research methodology used to bring awareness to social phenomenon by providing individuals the opportunity to use personal photos to explore the lived experiences. They also utilized community learning exchanges, which were assemblies that were held within a local community in which family members, students, school personnel, and stakeholders met to exchange ideas and strategies that sustain the positive school environment. They are working currently to finalize their data collection, and some of the initial reflections on their data collection include the teachers that were involved in the planning for summer learning programming included curricula believed that engagement was a major factor in program effectiveness. Even though the students preferred the shorter daily schedule, it did have an impact on field trip opportunities. And again, they are finalizing their data collection at this point. Next slide. Our final research team is UNCG Serve. PIs are Dr. Victoria Cole, who's here with us today, as well as Dr. Brian Hutchison, who's also here today. The co-PI is Laura Rusoff. The title of the research is Study of the Implementation Impact of North Carolina's Summer Career Accelerator Program. Next slide. The purpose of the qualitative study is to highlight how PSUs are implementing summer CAP programming. They are conducting the research in regions 5 and 6 with a focus on the career accelerator programs, PRC 177. The research questions are, how are summer CAP activities being implemented, and what are the promising practices that have been developed? What are the impacts of summer CAP participation on student learning, school engagement, and post-secondary plans? What characteristics are shared by promising practices? The background and expertise in transition to post-secondary education and career preparation could serve in a very unique position to provide timely, relevant, and collaborative services that can inform programmatic improvements to this particular program. Some of their primary forms of data collection include they were able to observe 10 different camps, 6 PSUs over the summer. They also conducted observations, interviews, and document review between June and August 2022 with 5 districts and 1 charter school. They also conducted document analysis of the programs that programmatic information was turned into DPI. They interviewed multiple stakeholders, conducted several site visits, and did several student focus groups and post-program interviews with instructors, site coordinators, and administrators and community partners. Some of their initial reflections on the data collection include that the PRC 177 supported a variety of CAP programs that were career-themed, paid internships, and project-based. The program goals varied by PSU and camp, and the desired outcomes included career exploration, increased awareness of PSU CTE pathways, soft skills, and re-engagement with schooling. The promising practices included ensuring that there is a plan to recruit staff and student early, Leveraging both CTE teachers' expertise and personal interests offers a variety of opportunities and areas of exploration for students. And it's important to budget for site-level coordinators to support staff to enable daily administration, reporting, and logistics, and ensure that there are facilities that are prepared to host camps. It's also important in terms of promising practice design activities that are interactive, hands-on, and brief in duration to keep students engaged throughout the day, especially for middle school students.
Next slide, please.
Again, thank you for your time and feedback. I will now take questions from our state board members and audience.
Questions from my fellow board members or advisors on this work?
I have a quick question, Ms. Candace. Thank you so much for that thorough report. I mean, it's just fascinating. I could keep up with my notes. So the last study, I think one of the questions had to do with implementation. So what did they learn about the impact of, in terms of findings? Are there any findings? I mean, you could respond at a later time, but I'm just curious about the relationship between implementation findings and the effect on whatever the criteria might be, success.
Well, our researchers are here today. This is the UNCG Serve Center about the CAP. What are the impacts of the summer CAP participation, and how were the summer CAP activities implemented, and what were those promising practices that have been developed? If you all want to just take a moment to answer that, Dr. Cole and Dr. Hutchinson.
Sure. So I understand the question.
You can come to the mic if you would like.
Please do.
Please do, yes. Thank you, Dr. Cole.
Thank you for your question. So I just want to make sure I have the question clear. You're asking what we've seen in the districts, how have we noticed changes, and how are we understanding changes that have happened and impacts on the students? Is that?
Yes, I heard that one of the questions had to do with maybe you focused or asked questions about, it was an implementation question.
Okay. So the study being a qualitative study, we were able to look at this particular program from the ground up because most of the PSUs have not had this funding available. So these programs were new. So when we developed our proposal, we took a very open view of let's see what this looks like in the PSUs and see how everybody is creating their programs and implementing their programs and what is different between those programs. And so a lot of our data collection really was on what districts were collecting or what they were providing for the students. We did not measure the impact on the students because that was not part of the planned study. Does that help?
It does. I mean, I'm just always fascinated about the effects of implementing something with fidelity.
Right, and we are too. It's interesting on the drive down, we were speaking about fidelity and talking about that. And since there was nothing really to judge fidelity, and really fidelity was, did they accept the funding, did they develop a program, and were they providing the program? That certainly was what our purview was. And we would really love an opportunity to talk to or revisit the schools in the next summer, because we had a lot of information about the fact that had we known now, we would have made these changes, or now that we've done this once, we can make changes. And so now we can start beginning to talk about fidelity and what does a model look like. And so that would be definitely something for the future studies.
Thank you so much for coming forward with.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Ms. Candace.
Anyone else?
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Daniel, and we'll look forward to the.
Excuse me. Thank you. Thank you.
Our next item is an evaluation and program update on Rethink Education, which is a statewide effort to strengthen remote learning access across North Carolina with targeted support for 45 economically distressed and rural counties. So we'll look forward to hearing what you have to tell us, Ms. Davis.
Good morning, everybody, and I do have some encouraging news to share with you. Rethink Education is funded by a federal grant that was written to provide K-8 full course content that is accessible on open platforms, as well as provides educator training on blended and virtual learning models. It was awarded in August of 2020, and this work has evolved into the Office of Virtual Instructional Services. The purpose of the Rethink Education Initiative is to provide supports and services to help students succeed in virtual, blended, or in-person learning. The initiative is supported by a 3-year grant from the U.S. Department of Education totaling $17.6 million to implement a statewide blended instructional model for grades K through 8. The Rethink Ed initiative works in 3 primary focus areas. The 3 focus areas are instruction, content, and access. The goals of the Rethink Ed initiative are to stabilize and improve student achievement during contingency learning circumstances, to empower resilient and adaptive teachers who are equipped for digital age instruction, and strengthen school, district, and community preparedness for future learning disruptions. This is an update to share the evaluation results per the executive summary. For purposes of this report, the EPIC team draws from 4 primary data sources to inform their findings. 1, assessments of professional development participants to capture satisfaction, skills, growth, and instructional improvement. 2 were post-event tickets to capture satisfaction with regional support network events and parent technical assistance events. 3, a parent engagement survey to assess parent participation in use of Rethink Ed resources. And 4, a PSU survey to capture PSU engagement with Rethink Ed services and supports, as well as PSU preparedness for learning disruptions. A primary component of the focus areas is professional development delivered by NCDPI in partnership with the North Carolina Center for the Advancement of Teaching. Rethink offers 2 professional development pathways where participants can receive training and coaching from NCDPI regional virtual instruction consultants. And these 2 pathways provide an opportunity for participants to earn certification, badges, as well as CEUs. The 3rd pathway is offered as a self-paced course through NESIS, and participants may earn CEUs, and that's offered for all grade levels K through 12. The blended learning facilitator pathway trains educators to be badged facilitators who will serve as leaders in virtual and blended learning in their districts. More than half of North Carolina districts participated in at least one cohort. Nearly 300 cohort 1 participants received a facilitator badge. And while most participants were from traditional schools, there were 15 charter schools represented in the facilitator pathway. The most common roles of these participants were teachers, instructional coaches, and instructional technology facilitators. Now, this is where the data begins to get even more encouraging. Surveys at the beginning and end of the course asked participants to respond to items indicating how frequently they used practices aligned with mastery of the North Carolina digital learning competencies for teachers. This figure shows the growth in digital competencies from the beginning to the end of the PD course. You can see that participants grew from between 24 and 51 percentage points for each competency during the course. This represents substantial growth in empowering educators to use practices that are associated with mastery of digital learning competencies. The purpose of the content focus of the Rethink Ed initiative is to provide standards-based, high-quality digital content to schools and districts in North Carolina, and to support parents and caregivers to encourage their child's learning. One primary component of this focus area is the development of digital content, which is made available to all schools and districts through Canvas Commons and Go Open NC. Content areas that are covered are English language arts, science, math, and social studies. Thus far, a total of 12 full courses have been developed that is equivalent to 84 modules for grades 6 through 8. We will be rolling out content for grades 3 through 5 beginning in January, and grades K through 2 by the summer. In addition to KA curriculum content, the Rethink initiative aims to provide information and assistance to parents and teachers by providing parent guides, teacher guides, and parent webinars. You have been provided a hard copy sample of each parent guide and teacher guide, and these are rich resources that are available. I encourage you to take a look at them and share them. I would like to take an opportunity to emphasize the significance of the full course online content that is provided to districts across the state. For the very first time, our K through 8 schools have access to online content that is aligned to North Carolina standards. The implications of this are far-reaching. Just imagine how beneficial this content will be for a beginning teacher walking into their classroom for the very first time. Imagine how beneficial this content will be for the experienced teacher who has transitioned to teach a new course. Imagine how this benefits students. These courses are fully accessible for all learning needs. Not only can this content be blended into a regular school day, but it may also be used during contingency learning circumstances such as inclement weather days, long and short-term suspensions, and school closings due to unforeseen situations. This is a game changer. This online content will continue to live beyond the life of this grant. The goal of the Access focus is to provide implementation support to build capacity for remote or blended instruction, to foster preparedness for potential learning disruptions in the future, and to assist recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. The primary component of this focus area is PSU technical assistance that's provided by our Rethink Ed partner, RTI, also known as Research Triangle Institute International. PSU technical assistance has been targeted to the highest need PSU and identified by tier designation. Participating districts create a technical assistance plan, which designates the focus areas of the assistance and planned activities. The technical assistance is intended to be tailored to meet the unique needs of each participating district. A total of 24 districts participated during the 2021-2022 school year. 79% of those partnering districts were designated as Tier 1, 13% as Tier 2, and 8% as Tier 3. The most common area of focus was leadership coaching, followed by instructional quality, community engagement, and strategic planning. As part of the technical assistance, RTI hosted 15 professional learning sessions and 4 strategy sessions that were attended by over 300 school district personnel. The majority of these participants cited they were very satisfied with both session types. In addition to surveys at the individual sessions, the evaluation team conducted a statewide survey of PSUs to ask general questions about satisfaction with technical assistance. Out of the 18 districts that responded to the survey, nearly all were satisfied with the technical assistance provided, and almost half stated they were extremely satisfied with their assistance from RTI. Peer networking events are still being developed throughout the 22-23 school year. However, a total of 3 events were hosted before the end of the 21-22 school year. 88% of participants reported being very satisfied with these events, and we continue to add networking events to include various subgroups of educators. We have an amazing team in the Office of Virtual Instruction Services. It consists of 8 regional virtual instructional consultants, 1 content lead, 1 project manager, and myself. In closing, the Rethink Ed program supported by this office has made substantial progress towards creating systems and completing activities proposed in the grant. In total, over 2,000 educators have enrolled in the Rethink Ed professional development. As a result, this work potentially has impacted over 14,000 students statewide. As a result of the efforts of the folks working on my team in the virtual instruction office, we have been granted and approved for a 1-year no-cost extension. Consequently, this grant will extend the work through July of 2024. Linked in the e-board are highlights, is a video, and it highlights the work in Columbus and Bertie counties, and I encourage you to take a look at that sometime soon. And at this time, we will hear voices from the field who have been impacted by this work. Joining us today are our Rethink Ed partners from Hope County, who will provide insight on how this work is impacting their district. I'd like to formally introduce and welcome to the podium Dr. Deborah Dallas, Superintendent, Dr. Dawn Ramsour, Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, and Mr. Jacob French, Director of Digital Teaching and Learning. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Superintendent Truitt, Chairman Davis, Vice Chair Duncan, and board members. We appreciate the opportunity for being here today. We just wanted to share a little bit about our journey with blended learning. In 2016, Hope County Schools became a 1-to-1 district, which means we delivered Chromebooks and put them in front of all of our students. But we quickly recognized that just putting a device in front of a student does not change learning, and it does not necessarily change instruction. So we quickly realized we needed to look at a structure or a delivery method to make sure that those devices we have in the classroom are actually leveraging and amplifying student learning. So we started our journey with blended learning in 2016. We started looking at what does that need to look like in our classrooms. Unfortunately, we were side-railed a little bit with the pandemic, and our focus became more about remote learning, with more of our students being off-site than necessarily blended learning. So we are now really ramping up, and through the help with the Rethink Ed grant, we've really been able to amplify our work with blended learning. But I'm going to let my 2 experts here kind of take it from here and talk to you about what we've been able to do with the grant and with blended learning.
Thank you. So as Dr. Dallas said, we started our journey in 2016, and we knew in 2016 we can't just put devices in front of students. So it's really important for us to figure out what that structure was going to be. And after lots of research and conversation, we said we know we need to do blended learning. This is going to give us an opportunity to amplify the learning that's happening in the classroom. And when we think about blended learning, there's lots of definitions out there, but the way I look at it is blended learning is an opportunity for teachers to provide what each individual student needs in the classroom. It is simply a vehicle. And that's the way we looked at that. So in blended learning, when we began that implementation in 2016, in 2017, we received the DLI planning grant, which was very instrumental in us being able to get a group of teachers together and really have them be our teacher leaders, piloting with them, coaching them on what blended learning was. And it was great. We actually, because of that grant, and Jake will talk about that in a moment, formed some great partnerships with Dr. Catlin Tucker, who helped us develop what did it mean in Hope County. And in 2018, we received another DLI grant. It was an implementation grant in which we really focused on scaling up. And the wonderful thing about that grant was we, again, created another partnership. And throughout this, one of the most important pieces was building the capacity within our district, building our teacher capacity and also building our leadership capacity. And we were able to do that with yet another partnership with Marcia Kish, and we continue that partnership today. And then in 2020, we received our second DLI implementation grant, where really the focus became about personalizing that learning. And this was really critical as we continued to grow. Again, this was a journey, it was a process. We started very like a box step, I'd say, and then we continued to flourish over time. And then finally, now, in the present, we are part of the Rethink facilitator cohort. We were in cohort 1. We had several of our teacher leaders and our district leadership to be part of that. And then this year, we are in cohort 2, a part of that as well. And that's continued us building capacity within our district. Jake and I are actually a member of cohort 2. So going forward, one of the things that was really instrumental in us, and as we developed this, we realized it had to be a process. This was not something teachers were going to learn right away. Okay, it's like going from the box step to the tango. There was a lot of steps in between, and this was really important because phase 1, and we realized some of our teachers were stuck there. I think I was in Chicago, and I met Marcia, and I said, "There's got to be an answer," and we worked together to develop these phases. And so phase 1 is really just, we have some teacher autonomy, but we're giving some autonomy to students, and that begins to expand as we get to phase 2. Students have more autonomy, there's more flexibility, and then when we get to phase 3, this is exactly what we want to see in the classroom. It is very personalized for each individual in the classroom, allowing our teachers to provide each student exactly what they need. Jay.
Thanks. So as Dr. Ramser mentioned, some of our backward, right? Why maybe we're in such a good place to benefit from Rethink now. These are some of the products that came out of our relationships and projects over the DLI grants, including our relationship with Dr. Catlin Tucker, the development of several evaluation instruments, our model teacher program, and culminating in growinghope.org, which is a piece of software that our team uses to evaluate teachers and provide data to principals on where their schools sit in the implementation of blended learning. But that brings us to the current. So if you don't mind, the next slide. In 2021, our district rewrote our strategic plan, and now we have some buy-in. Strategic plan lists blended learning by name in the strategic plan. That's a big deal for buy-in from folks in the district, right? But we've evaluated our previous years of experience and realized that maybe the way we were doing it wasn't really scalable. During those DLI grants, we were working with specific cohorts of teachers, maybe 20 to 30 teachers at a time, coaching them really intensively all year long, making them into model teachers, we hope, by the end. When we talk about percentage of implementation in the district, we're really proud to have worked with nearly 150 teachers over that time. With teacher turnover rates, when we evaluated how many of those teachers we've trained were still in the district, it was only about 40 or so. So we realized that if we're trying to push this out to 750 teachers, that small cohorts probably aren't going to work. And we started to think about what would. Well, along came RTM with the facilitator cohorts, right? So if you don't mind, scrolling to the next slide. Our work so far in Rethink, as Dawn mentioned, we have participated in both facilitator cohorts. 100% of the digital teaching and learning team, including our ITFs, have been through the facilitator cohort. Nearly 100% of our curriculum and instruction team have been through as facilitators. And we look forward to, spoilers, Kevin, sending a whole bunch of school representatives through in the next cohort so that we can have teacher-level leaders at the school buildings. We're not fortunate enough to have an ITF for every school, so having someone on campus 100% of the time who can be knowledgeable and facilitate those conversations in the school building is going to be really important for us. I neglected to put it on the slide, apologies, but we have also benefited from the technical assistance through RTI. We have met already, our ITFs have had a session with Frederica, who's wonderful. You don't know Frederica now, you should. Coaching the ITFs on how to get that knowledge into the hands of teachers in a beneficial way. We all know that knowing things doesn't mean that you can convey it accurately or that you'll be good at getting it across a conversation. So being a skilled coach is important. So we're really benefited from it as well. All right. I think that's everything I have. I don't want to keep you any longer. Do you have questions?
Questions for our visitors or for Ms. Davis? We always love to hear from our districts the on the ground results of the programs that we hear about. So thank you so much, and it sounds like this is a great thing for Hope County students.
Yes, thank you so much for that.
Any other questions? Great work, very exciting. That the resources that you're providing to the districts to impact instruction. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Horn, you have one last piece, and this one's going to be very quick, I think, right?
Yes.
This is information on the NC Collaboratory and DPI partnership for space policy.
Yes, thank you. We are very, very excited about this. This is a brand new partnership between DPI and the NC Collaboratory, which is it's a policy research group over at UNC Chapel Hill. We announced a series of research studies that got awarded in partnership with the Collaboratory. But I would say this is probably the most comprehensive research effort that the agency has taken on since Race to the Top. The next 2 years, we are going to have an opportunity as a state agency to partner with some of the best researchers in the state to really help us understand the impact of the pandemic on our teachers, on our students, on our schools. You'll go to the next slide, Maria. So this is $6.7 million in research funds that was part of ARPA. So that was the legislature allotted it to the NC Collaboratory over at UNC Chapel Hill. And then they partnered with Office of Learning Recovery and leadership from across the agency to define what those research priorities would be. We just announced them last week, I think, if you go to the next slide. And the way we define these is we really were interested on the longer term impacts of the pandemic. So we worked really closely with folks inside the building and also looking at where the legislature had prioritized a lot of the state level funds. And so we identified a series of these priorities you guys see behind me. And then if you go to the next slide, focusing in also on some of the way that the local school districts were using their local ESSER dollars. The next slide, you can see the list of, we awarded 20 research projects to 14 institutions across the state. So we'll be working with faculty from our HBCUs and our publics and our privates. And over the next 2 years, we'll be getting very rich, robust information to share with this board, to share with leadership at the agency, to share with our local superintendents and school boards, because we all know that in 2 years, there's an enormous funding cliff coming. And we want to be able to know with a great deal of confidence which of those priorities we should invest in going forward. And we are very excited about this opportunity, obviously.
Questions for Dr. Horn? Thank you, Dr. Horn.
Awesome. Thanks,
Forward to hearing more about this. Moving along to action on first read, SLA 1 is North Carolina Textbook Commission recommendations for K-12 English language development and 9-12 social studies. So, Dr. Fair, are you going to start us off, or I believe we have commissioners here with us, is that correct?
We do. Chair Davis, Vice Chair Duncan, and board members, good morning. The next item before you is coming from the North Carolina Textbook Commission. It is their recommended list of books to adopt for the areas of K-12 English language development and K-12 social studies. As you may remember, the Textbook Commission is comprised of parents, principals, and teachers across the elementary, middle, and high school levels, and they are charged with coming up with a list of recommended textbooks after their review with standards alignment and alignment to quality criteria for you to adopt for the state list. So the commissioners, you could advance to the next two slides. The next one. The commissioners are responsible for evaluating the textbooks, and they're also responsible for appointing advisors who assist them, and they direct the work of the advisors. And once all of that work is completed, they then come before you, like today, to present their reports and their list of recommended textbooks to you for adoption. So with me today are the chair, Dr. Jared Dennis, and co-chair, Ms. Kathleen Linker of the North Carolina Textbook Commission, to present that information to you.
Good morning. I am Kathleen Linker. I am primarily a reading design coach for Alliance Salisbury School System, and it is my privilege to have been on the commission for 18 years, the co-chair for 6 years. So thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to any questions that you might have. The first slide is just a quick infographic of the process that we go through in our evaluation cycle, and it begins when you approve the invitation, and you did that last February. And from that point, we meet as a commission a couple times. We have presentations from the DPI personnel to support the criteria sheets, explain what they're looking for. We have any input for the training with our advisors. Then we have, of course, our ethics training, and we move on to planning that week in the summer when we have the advisors from across the state to come in that are experts in the field to lend their eye at the criteria that we provide for them. We then spent about a week in June in Greensboro with, we spent 2 days with the advisors training them. We had a blended model this year. We trained face-to-face. We sent them home to evaluate on the digital platform. The commission stayed together so we could have meetings as we went through the process, and then we had the deliberation where we debriefed those advisors at the end of the week. So we've spent a busy week digging deep, looking at the criteria that we had, and looking at the submissions that were provided from the publishers that wish to participate. And so from that, we take that input. While all this is going on simultaneously, each commissioner is also reviewing those submissions with the same criteria, and we work on our report. We convene again in September, and we have what we call deliberations and reconsideration meeting, where we come and we discuss bit by bit and make recommendations. If we do not approve something on the first time, the publishers have the opportunity to present to us anything that we didn't note to see if they can find it or answer any questions for that. And then we vote again, and that is what you get in your report. So you have, I believe in your information, the short summary report and the very extensive report that is each individual commissioner's personal report. So. And so you will see that there's two charts. The first one's for ELD. We had 27 submissions, and we approved or recommended 4 of those. And the next slide. And for social studies, we had 78 submissions. This was K through 12. And of those 78, we approved 46. And so at that time, if you So you have that recommendation, and the survey is also by publisher in your report. And if you have any questions, and I should say, this is Dr. Dennis. He joined us right in the heat of the moment, and we elected him chair in August. So he just jumped right on in, so.
So I defer to her since she is the expert in this area. Are there any questions about the report?
Vice Chair.
Thank you for the amazing amount of work you've done on this. So, I tried to get through the 800 pages of materials, but I did not read every word. I will promise you that. But it was a real indication of how much work you all put into the commission, and we're very grateful for that. And just really one question. It's about first the ELD textbooks and then the social studies, but it's the same question. In ELD, there were 4 out of 27 submissions that were approved, and I'm interested in what was the disqualifying features of the threads and disqualifying features of the 23 that were not approved.
For the easier to do, for Lexia, they just had 1 submission and it did not meet the standards. For Cengage Learning, they also did not meet the standards. They bundled the submissions together. So it was like, their kindergarten, they had one that was just kindergarten, and that met the kindergarten band of standards. So that's the 4 that you have. Then they had some that they bundled together that was 1st through 3rd. So it may have met, one may have met 1st grade, but did not meet 2nd grade and 3rd grade. And when you bundle it together, it has to meet each individually to be considered. And so that would be the reason why Cengage had 4 that did approve and the rest of them didn't. It was the bundling of them by grade levels and the way that we evaluate them as bundled. And so it would be like a 2nd grade labeled 2nd grade workbook for 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. So it met 2nd grade, but it did not make 1st grade and did not make 3rd grade, therefore did not make the 80% requirement overall.
So then if we move to social studies, 8 out of the 10 appeared to have all or all but one of their submissions approved. 2 of them, eDynamic and social studies services, had a total of 36 submissions and only 6 were approved. What were the disqualifying features for those?
In all cases this year, the disqualification was that it didn't make the standards, which means that it did not make 80%. In some of the social studies, the 4th grade standards and 8th grade standards specifically cite North Carolina, and they may not have been specific in North Carolina or gave enough specific to North Carolina. But in all cases, for this adoption, everyone that was not approved or recommended was based on that not meeting that 80% threshold for the standard course of study for that course.
Any other questions about this very deep and labor-intensive work that you all do? We'll be asked to, because this is an action on first read, we'll be approving those recommendations. Or voting. Other questions? Thank you both so much for coming. Thank you for the work that you do. Moving on to action, we have one item, SLA2, which is the report to the General Assembly on Read to Achieve data and a state level summary of that. Dr. Ryan is here to answer any questions. We talked about this last month. It's a fairly exhaustive across a wide range of topics related to the Read to Achieve legislation. So any questions, further questions on this for Dr. Ryan? Hearing none. One item of discussion, which is SLA3, another report to the General Assembly on broadening successful participation in advanced classes. And Ms. Coltrane and Ms. Cox are here to talk about
everybody. So good to see you. It's so great to be in the Sandhills. So today we're bringing to you our annual report about broadening access and successful programs focused on advanced coursework. Okay? This is all based on legislation. We're going to give you an overview of the report, our North Carolina data, We are going to really speak to the idea of the recovery that we're seeing, which is really exciting. I'm so glad Beth is here to share with you. I don't get to share the good stuff, but it's really good stuff. And it's hopeful, which is what we want to see. And then our next step. So just because I know we have a lot of new advisors, not so many new board, well, a couple of new board members, we'll go to kind of just give you the foundation of the work. So there is legislation that was passed in 16, if I recall, it was based on some legislation in Florida that really talked about increasing access to advanced coursework. And removing barriers, as well as success. 2014, look at that, I even have it on the slide. And so we are on currently our 9th year. It's hard to believe that it's been so long, but you're gonna see how this has really made a tremendous impact in our state over the years. And the 3 major goals for the legislation, one is really about building capacity for success. Through work with the College Board. So actually, College Board is specifically given funds in legislation to create the North Carolina AP partnership. And we'll talk to you a little bit about that. It does ensure access because we now, for those of you that don't know, we pay for all students AP, IB, and Cambridge fees and tests, which really is a game changer for our students and our families. I know myself, I was limited to 2. Daddy said, if Carolina's only going to take 2, we're not paying for more than 2. You know, we run a very fixed income. So it's a beautiful thing that we do this. And then this idea that it really supports your mission of equity and excellence, as well as our office's mission to idea of increasing access and achievement. So for the North Carolina AP partnership, they really focus on 2 kind of primary professional development, to go back to the conversation this morning. One is really focused on our targeted districts, which are focused on our low performing districts. And so I have one story with Bertie recently, with Dr. Smallwood coming into Bertie, really has put an increase on AP courses. So I was talking to Beth. Beth then said, wait a minute, let's reach out to the College Board. And then they now are giving them wraparound services. Kicked it off just last week with the 2-day symposium, this week actually. 2-day symposium really talking about building capacity, what resources they're looking at, vertical alignment, et cetera. So it's really giving clear technical assistance to both the research report as well as what Chairman Davis was speaking about, really looking at professional development there. And then they also give statewide support, which was actually an ask of our team. And we said, hey, we need to do this and give targeted support, but we also need to go bigger, right? Because there are needs all across our state. And so they're doing some great work. One program they've done with their launch of just incredible resources is this whole AP mentoring program where teachers can specifically say, hey, I teach this course, and they're giving mentorship throughout the entire year in the most kind of courses that have some of those teachers. So it's just some really, really exciting work that we're really grateful to College Board for. So now to some of the report, kind of quick things before we get to the good stuff that Beth gets to share with you. One, just to let you know, we spent close to $12.5 million that day when I had to sign that paperwork for Alexis. I thought, wow, it had come. And that we do continue to have increased course availability. There are local courses, there are partners at BPS and School of Math and Science. Really looking at AP Seminar as a new course and really kind of doing that. And then doing a lot of work with CTE that we launched last year and really embedding some of our AP courses into career pathways, which is just really exciting to really build that, because so often we think one versus or one separate, right? And it's really about bringing things together. And so we're just super excited. And just once again, which I know you all have on your work the last couple of days, you're very familiar that this does directly speak to your goal 1 4C with increasing access to AP, IB, and CT. So now for the great stuff. And I like building capacity as well on the team. So we're letting Beth, who does the hard work, share the great work.
I feel like I should run up here.
We do have stars.
Yes, we did. So some highlights from the work that Sneha outlined for you. We do see some recovery in our AP data. So we did see that the number of AP exam takers did decrease just a little bit, but when we compare ourselves with the nation, it wasn't as big of a drop. So that's something that we do take into consideration. And of course, the number of exams, we call them qualifying exams, with the passing of score of 3, 4, or 5, did increase 13.3%. So that's quite wonderful. Yes. Now, we also do look at our individual student groups, and we look at some of our demographic groups. And one demographic student group realized increases in both the participation or access, we call it, as well as successful participation. So our Black AP exam takers increased 1.2%, which was more than the nation. And then the scores also increased 36.7% over last year, which is
I'm not highlighting that.
I know, 36.7%. So the access that we've been working on for years is now catching up to the success. And that's just
results of good work from our districts, that's for sure. The number of Hispanic students exams, the scores, attaining a score of 3 or 4 or 5 increased 24.7%.
94.5%.
So, and they're seeing movement nationwide, but it's important to highlight that North Carolina is out front. We are outpacing the nation, so that's wonderful. We also look at our current enrollment. So everything that I've talked about has been last year compared to the year prior. AP student current enrollment is now back up. We have an increase. We had several, I've got the arrows there. It's kind of this, these motions. But we haven't had an increase. And if you look at the launch of this legislation in 2014, we had great gains in the very beginning, and we are now back to that kind of enrollment that we saw initially. So that's really exciting, and I think that will just increase with the work we've been doing across the state with our NCAP partnership, but also with CTE, as Sneha mentioned. The next couple of slides are about our International Baccalaureate highlights in Cambridge. Those are more limited in our state. We have about 29 schools that have IB diploma programs. And they are seeing an increase in enrollment, which is great. And their pass rate is really great, 76%. So students are performing in our IB diploma programs. We also have a slight increase in Cambridge programs, there are 5 schools in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, and then there's also one charter school that has this program. So we've had quite an increase there. They're really building the program in CMS. And then lastly, just talking about some next steps and ideas for continuing this improvement. I work with each of these programs monthly. We do some check-ins to ensure that we're keeping our fingers on the pulse of what's happening in North Carolina. And so we're going to continue to focus on talent development. And with that, we don't just mean our students, but also our teachers, as Sneha mentioned, and ensuring that they have best practices and they are prepared to teach this rigorous coursework. But in addition, we want to ensure that our students, that we are developing our students and ensuring that they have access to rigorous opportunities prior to some of these programs. So that's something that we're working on as well. Ensuring that we remove barriers, of course, as always, and partnering with our CTE friends for sure. That's been quite a highlight. So that's the end of our presentation. Thank you for your time.
Any questions for these ladies on this great work? Yes.
I'd like to say just thank you so much for sharing those moments of success. It makes me think about some of the high schools that I've actually visited that because of your work and because of the access being granted, they literally have programs that are promoting like, hey, come try it out. You belong here. And that is something that a lot of our students need to hear, that they can achieve this, and we see the results of that. So thank you so much for sharing.
Well, I'm a teachers, right? And yeah, we're looking at all the structures, all of us provide the infrastructure. The teachers are doing the hard work, and And the resources at collaboratory has really developed because of the pandemic. And it all got heightened. Yes, really it's remarkable. Thank you.
And I would just say, as a principal of one of the schools that receives this benefit, I want to thank you personally. It's a tremendous asset to our school culture, to the teachers that provide those courses. So thank you very much.
Great place to come from. I know people that are right there. You're love it. Yes. Any other questions?
Just a quick comment. I think your presentation is causing me to remember our analysis of our objectives yesterday. And I think you could probably put a star. I want to maybe objective 1 because it had something to do with access to the programs that you're.
Yes.
So this is an artifact of good work. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. It was a great way to almost end our. 4 consent items that we have to consider later on today. The first is SLA 4, a State Board of Education policy amendment to GRAD-008, advanced courses that satisfy graduating requirements. This policy change includes a new math course, AP pre-calculus, and technical updates of IB math courses and some AP courses. SLA 5 is a report to the General Assembly on the implementation of the arts education graduation requirement. You may remember that 1 credit in arts education is now a requirement for graduation for students who entered 6th grade this year. And the report basically just outlines the work being done to support this requirement for our students. SLA 6 is also a report to the General Assembly on the statewide administration of the testing program. Again, we see this one every year. Each year, districts are required to report any localized standardized testing to DPI. And DPI is required to make this report of districts that exceed the state average in the number of tests or the number of hours required for students to complete the test. And finally, SLA 7, another report to the General Assembly, schools for students with visual and hearing impairments. Each year, parents or guardians of students with these types of impairments are provided a consent form for release of information to both DPI and the directors of the residential schools. The affirmative consent responses are included in this report as required. And with that, Chair Davis, I conclude the student learning achievement.
Thank you, Ms. Kamnitz. We'll now turn to the Healthy Responsible Students Committee, chaired by Mr. Reginald Keenan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Reginald Keenan, along with Alan Duncan, coming forward for the HRS Committee. The Chair will have 1 discussion item, and Dr. Ellen Essig will talk about the report we have to submit to the General Assembly involving the school-based mental health plans and suicide risk protocols. And with that, Dr. Essig, go ahead, if you would.
Thank you so much. This is a second year of this report that goes to the General Assembly each year, describing the suicide prevention plans as well as the overall mental health plans for our schools. I am going to actually turn this over to Covia Lovett, our school social work consultant, as I think she can answer any questions right on the spot for you, and look forward to sharing this information.
Good morning. I'm going to move through this because I do realize that I'm standing between you and lunch. So just to back up a little bit, this is year 2, and the state board adopted this piece of legislation in November of 2020. And so districts are still paving their way through it, and we're supporting them through that. So what the plan will look like is around these plan components and policy overview. So these are the things that were legislated and that we're looking for within the school mental health plans that you see outlined there. And all of those things are legislated. We didn't ask districts to do anything additional from what the law sent to us. So overall plan compliance is what you'll see next. And so this was as of October 17th. Districts are supposed to report to us by September 15th annually. From that date of September 15th until it is absolutely necessary that I submit things for this board meeting, I conduct outreach with districts to ensure that all of their information is turned in and compliant. And so as of October 17th, we had one charter and one regional lab. As of today, we only have one outstanding regional lab school that has not submitted, and we are continuing to work with them. You'll see here the data sources that are used to help districts identify their priorities, their strengths, their weaknesses. This is just to determine how they work and what they put their efforts into and initiatives with the school mental health. And so some of those outstanding there are of course, Power School data and all of the points that they're able to pull from that, as well as some other things you can kind of see there is what they use to inform their plans. Next, you'll see the trends from year 1 to year 2 and what the differences that they use there. You'll see that the Say Something app was utilized a lot more in year 2 for some of their data collection. Next, we ask about what do you use to promote mental wellness, and what does that look like? What programs might exist? What does that look like integrated into your school day? And so how might they be addressing that? And so how most of these slides are set up hereafter are that you'll see the question that we asked here in the first column, and then in the second set, you'll see what their prior compliance was. The General Assembly asked that we look at prior compliance. So you'll see that for year 1 in the second set. We also asked about training. 6 topics were legislated, and then 1 additional was added because districts were asking how could they represent that they were doing that. And so the first 6 you'll see were legislated training topics that districts must do each year, and you'll see their representation of how they are conducting those trainings as well as their compliance for last school year. We do routinely see that teen dating violence is consistently lower from year 1 and year 2 than the other training topics. You'll see here the trends in that. These are differences in not addressed. So there are some reasons we feel like there's some no's in there, but we're continuing to provide outreach. We also talk about early interventions, things like access to care, policy reviews, integration into the emergency plans within the communities. And so you'll see that that's also one of the lowest, where PSUs, the integration and inclusion into their local emergency services and preparation plans. And so we are continuing to work even through with the Center for Safer Schools to ensure that there are cohesive methods that for PSUs to integrate into that emergency planning system. This next slide is around transitions and reentries. So again, about access to providers, about how we communicate with providers, and how we reintroduce students who may be in residential or hospital settings. Staffing ratios is what you'll see next. Does the plan address staffing for the staff that's related to the school mental health plans that you see listed there? And you'll see, again, the prior year compliance with that. Trends in those ratios. So there's some progress here, year 1 to year 2 differences in whether they address this in their plans or not. You'll see next are the MOUs. It was also legislated that we try to outreach with our LMEs, MCOs, and providers for MOUs for escalated services, for treatments, referrals, and follow-ups. And so districts are making their way through that. That was consistently low last year as in the first year. Still this year, there are some problems with obtaining the MOUs just because there are some provider deserts within our state. And we are still working with districts to try to address those alongside DHHS. You'll see here some stakeholder information about who is involved in their conversations around school mental health and their plans. Some really promising numbers here around family engagement, which is one of the areas you'll see later as needing some additional supports. And again, trends from year 1 to year 2 here and what the differences were in those involved. You'll see that some of the highest were around community agencies and county support. So our departments of social services are agencies that support resources and basic needs, and then our colleges and universities as partners. And so here we kind of asked in that policy report about what is it that they need to find themselves in compliance. Sorry, you can keep going. Sorry. There you go. And so what they identified with most, what came up the most were areas around the trainings and how to support that. And we are currently working with some partners to be able to comprehensively address all 6 of those training topics within the agency. Also, some permanent staffing. We did see the ratios increase this year, but we also know that those funds will disappear soon because a lot of those positions are emergency funded. They also indicated help around securing the MOUs around, in particular with trainings, the substance use and teen dating violence. And then, of course, more consistent funding and community providers. And so what happens kind of throughout this process and from year to year is that identified PSUs receive technical assistance and are welcome to all of the supports that we offer. But this is what kind of triggers me to be able to activate some of these supports and helping them be in full compliance of their plans. I believe that is it. Happy to answer questions.
Any questions, comment?
That one slide where you said what they need,
Yes.
was that in order of importance?
So, no, it is not in order of importance. It is based on just what came up the most. The most important was funding. And
and that's what I was looking at, because you mentioned something, you said provider deserts.
Yes.
Now, is that, you're talking about outside agencies that you all partner with?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Anyone else?
I'm just curious, and I'm not sure if you can answer this question or not, but since this report has been required, do you think that it has caused the districts to be more mindful of this work than perhaps they were previously? Has it focused attention?
I think it's set some uniformity. I think prior to this, there were certain individuals who have always been focused on this work. But with the implementation of this plan, it brought in more folks to the table to get with those folks who have always been intentional about this and to kind of expand upon their efforts as well, because now it's more of a comprehensive and uniformity in the districts and within districts and charters, LEAs and charters.
And the school violence component we've seen, How much of that is driving folks to call for your services? I mean, is it, because, oftentimes we have a school shooting and that's the first thing we talk about. We talk about mental health. And then it seems like after the news breaks, it's on to another story and we forget about it. Is that continuing to drive it and make it a priority?
It is, yes. School violence, community violence is definitely something that is integrated within these plans. Most plans also include their crisis plan when they submit their suicide risk protocol, which is required that they submit their suicide risk protocol. But in addition to that, many LEAs and charters have also included their threat assessment protocols, their crisis intervention protocols, and their emergency services protocols as well. Because when they sit down to do this particular piece, they realize that those pieces integrated together are much more comprehensive. And so, yes, all of that drives certainly this work, and a lot of technical assistance from myself as the mental health provider within the agency is around when things happen in our districts and how we support them and how I coordinate services within their communities. We have a couple we're working with right now on that very thing.
I guess, Mr. Chair, there's no other questions or information. We conclude our report.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan. Well, I must commend our committee chairs in the morning. You put us 30 minutes ahead of schedule and put a lot of pressure on our afternoon committee chairs to take the same mark. So we're going to break now for lunch. I'd ask us to be back in our seats by 12:15 as we have a special guest who's going to bring us a short presentation that we don't want to miss. So let's break for lunch. We'll return at 12:15.
Good job. I did good job. I got it. Good job.